Okay, so let's talk about sustainable forests and fisheries. The main idea here is to answer the question how, if you need to buy a paper or wood product or a seafood product, how do you know if it's produced sustainably or not? Most of us don't have time to sit around and research the best, most sustainable options for the purchases that we make. And so, in this lesson, I'll discuss a few options that can make that decision a lot easier for people. Okay, so the first thing, forest management. So if I want to buy a wood or paper product, how do I know which is most sustainable? Again, most people don't have time to sit down and research, and, even take a class like this or whatever to understand the implications of the production of some of these goods that they're buying. And so this is actually a pretty big problem because people don't have the time, the resources, the knowledge, the information to make these sort of decisions. And so there are people and companies that have recognized this, and one such company is this Forest Stewardship Council. Okay, so the Forest Stewardship Council is a group of organizations and companies that got together in the 1990s, with to try to address this very problem. Consumers, you want to make it as easy as possible for consumers to make sustainable choices, and that's what this FSC logo does. And so, if you're out shopping for a wood product, paper product, whatever, what you can do is you can just look for this FSC logo, and if it has this logo, then a few things. So FSC, the Forest Stewardship Council, they're a third-party certifier, and what they do is they investigate the whole supply chain from extraction to production to sales of wood and paper products, and they determine a few things. They make sure that civil and indigenous rights were respected, that social and environmental conservation values are maintained or enhanced, natural forests are not converted, highly hazardous, pesticides and GMOs are prohibited, and that the harvesting of the trees must meet national laws and international treaties. So the timber industry is kind of notorious for allowing companies to cut down trees in environmentally sensitive areas or areas of the world where the environmental laws are a little more lax. And not to get into too much detail, but there's a lot of really negative impacts of unsustainably harvested trees. And so what the Forest Stewardship Council sought to do was to say, hey, what we'll do, we're not involved with the manufacturers, we're not involved with the people that are selling them or producing the goods. We're an independent body, okay? So we're a third-party certifier. And what we do is we don't, we are completely independent, we're unbiased, and we're going to inspect how the good is produced from extraction to production, okay? And so what they do is they put in all this work to make sure, to the extent possible, it's an imperfect system, but it's certainly better than nothing. To the extent possible, they say, look, this gets our stamp of approval, and the only way it gets this logo is if it was, the short story is if it was produced and harvested, manufactured sustainably. And so what's really nice about that is if I am out shopping for, let's say I need to get some wood or whatever, all I need to do is look at this label. I don't have to do any additional research. I don't have to look things up in the internet, whatever. I can just see this label and I can feel a little bit better about my purchase, right? And so this is supposed to be an unbiased. They're not paid. They're not, beholden to the manufacturers, to the timber industries, and so forth. So you can go out and you'll see if you look on a paper product or a wood product, you'll see this logo on a lot of those. And it has kind of changed the industry in a lot of ways. Like Home Depot, for example, only sells FSC certified wood. So they have gone a long way to change the industry. All that being said, source reduction is still better. Still better to not use the product in the first place. Yes, it's better than the unsustainable production and harvesting and so forth. But still the best option is to reduce, to not use it in the first place. And so the Marine Stewardship Council, or MSC, using the same method to address a different problem, and that is that there's major fishery exploitation worldwide. So basically, there's a lot of problems with seafood harvesting globally. And so the Marine Stewardship Council sought to do the same thing, and that is they inspect every step in the supply chain. Are they harvesting it sustainably? Are they respecting native rights? Are they respecting local laws? Are they making sure that the population can survive over time? And again, you can go, if you're looking for seafood, you can go and look for the Marine Stewardship Council logo, and you don't have to do any additional research. Makes it a lot easier for consumers to make sustainable choices. Again, this is imperfect. There are some issues with the MSC logo. There is some accusations that they're not quite as, they're a little more in the pocket of big industry than maybe they could be. But again, it is better than nothing. But once again, the best way to manage our resources, to reduce our impact on resources, is to reduce and not use it in the first place. And just to give you some idea, there were a couple of videos posted about the unsustainable fishing practices. I'm not getting into too much detail here, but it's really incredible, actually, the fishing industry. They use these things. So there's a couple different methods. One of them is called long lining. And so a long lining is this, you have a boat, and they use a long line is basically a really, really long fishing line, to the point that some of these fishing lines, if you can believe this, are 150 kilometers long. So, that's whatever, 80 miles or so, 70 miles long. So imagine a single fishing line that's 70 miles long. And so there's thousands of hooks on this line, and the problem here is that they end up catching a lot of things that they didn't intend to catch. Okay, that's the short story. You could look into long lining. Trawling is another really big problem, where they drag these weighted nets along the bottom of the ocean floor, and they drag up and capture anything that gets in their way. But a big problem with this is something called bycatch. So bycatch is one of those terms the industry loves to use because it sounds very innocuous, sort of non-threatening, like bycatch. It's just sort of it's an accidental thing. It just doesn't sound too bad. So bycatch is anything that they catch that they don't intend to catch. So if they're fishing for tuna and they catch a shark, the shark is bycatch. Now the big problem here is that bycatch ends up more often than not, they just get dumped overboard and they're dead. So you look at sea turtles, sea birds are a really big problem. Millions of sharks each year die because of these fishing practices. So there's a lot of reasons why something like the Marine Stewardship Council is really important, because they won't allow this type of fishing to occur. Excuse me. And if you're interested, the Monterey Bay Aquarium is really well known for their guide for sustainable seafood. So let me click on this real quick. Okay, so here's the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch website. So you can go to seafoodwatch.org. And so you can actually look at their consumer guide, which is really important. There's all kinds of stuff here. You feel free to explore. But so if you want to buy some seafood, or you can actually search. So let's look at. So you can go to seafood recommendations. So click up here, seafood recommendations, and there's basically this green, yellow, red system. And I'll let you play around with this. So let's say I want to buy some salmon. So you can actually enter in salmon here. Excuse me. Just hit enter, and they have a nice app. You can actually download their app, which is great. So if you're out shopping for seafood, you can look at it. So let's look at our salmon recommendations. Okay. And so these, they're very comprehensive. You see they have a lot of other issues here. They have a lot of information about the benefits of sustainable seafood, aquaculture. There's a lot of information on here. So if I'm looking for salmon, My best choice is to get Atlantic salmon. That's actually, this looks like it's aquaculture, so you can actually expand here to look at all of it. And there's a lot of details here. But the point is that this is a really good way. Um, if you are going to buy seafood, again, the best thing you can do is not do it in the first place, so you can, in order to conserve resources. But salmon's really healthy, and there's nothing wrong with eating the salmon from time to time. But if you are going to buy some seafood, this is actually a really good way to do it. Again, it's a little bit more in depth than looking at, just looking at the Marine Stewardship Council logo. But Monterey Bay Aquarium, really highly regarded, really well known for their guide to sustainable seafood. So if you ever are going to buy seafood, this is a really good option in order to help find the most sustainable option. Okay, and so that's it for sustainable fisheries and trees.